The first time I met Karen Whitmore, she was standing in my driveway at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, wearing a hot pink velour tracksuit that looked like it had survived 3 decades of aggressive washing cycles. Her bleached blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail so tight it seemed to physically lift her eyebrows, and she clutched a clipboard like it was a weapon of mass destruction. I should have known right then that she would become the bane of my suburban existence. "You must be the new neighbor," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries like hello or nice to meet you. Her voice had that particular quality that suggested she'd spent years perfecting the art of talking to managers and demanding satisfaction from customer service representatives. "I'm Karen Whitmore, HOA President, Neighborhood Watch Coordinator, and Community Standards Enforcer. We need to discuss your landscaping choices." I had been living at 1247 Maple Grove Drive for exactly 8 days. 8 blissful days of unpacking, boxers, setting up my home office, and marveling at the fact that I'd finally achieved my dream of homeownership at 32. The house was a modest 2-story, colonial with cream-colored siding and hunter green shutters, nestled in the kind of neighborhood where people actually knew their neighbors' names and borrowed cups of sugar without irony, or so I thought. My landscaping. I glanced around at the perfectly manicured lawn that the previous owners had maintained with what appeared to be military precision. "What about it?" Karen's nostrils flared slightly, as if she detected an offensive odor. "The rose bushes along your front walkway are technically 3 inches too close to the property line. According to Section 4.7 of the Homeowners Association Guidelines, all ornamental shrubbery must maintain a minimum distance of 18 inches from boundary markers." She brandished her clipboard like evidence in a criminal trial. "I'll need you to have them relocated by the end of the week." That was my introduction to Karen Whitmore, and it set the tone for every interaction we would have over the following 6 months. She complained about my mailbox being the wrong shade of black, apparently. There was a difference between midnight black and obsidian black, and I had chosen poorly. She left passive-aggressive notes about my garbage cans being visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. She even had the audacity to suggest that my choice of outdoor lighting fixtures was aggressively modern and didn't complement the neighborhood's classic American aesthetic. But the real trouble began when I decided to install the pool. After months of Karen's relentless nitpicking, I figured a backyard swimming pool would be the perfect retreat from her tyrannical rule. My property was completely enclosed by a 6-foot privacy fence, and I made sure to pull all the necessary permits and follow every municipal regulation to the letter. The pool itself was a modest rectangular design, nothing ostentatious or over the top. Just a simple 16 by 32-foot rectangle with a shallow end for relaxation and a deep end for actual swimming. The installation process took 3 weeks, during which Karen made it her personal mission to monitor every aspect of the construction. She'd appear at her kitchen window at precisely 7 a.m. each morning, coffee mug in hand, watching the workers, like a hawk surveying its territory. Twice, she called the city to complain about the noise levels, even though the construction was taking place well within the permitted hours. Once, she actually tried to measure the distance between my pool and her property line, marching across my backyard with a tape measure and that same clipboard, as if she were conducting an official inspection. "You know," she said to me one afternoon as I was reviewing the electrical work with my contractor, "pools really affect property values, not always in a good way." "I'm sure it'll be fine, Karen," I replied, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. "I did my research." She made a note on her clipboard. "We'll see about that." The pool was finished on a Friday in late June, just as the summer heat was beginning to settle over our little suburban enclave like a thick blanket. I spent the weekend getting everything set up: pool furniture, outdoor speakers, a small refrigerator for beverages, and twinkling string lights that transformed my backyard into something that looked like it belonged in a home and garden magazine. It was perfect. Well, almost perfect. The one upgrade I'd insisted on, despite the additional cost, was a state-of-the-art security system. After years of living in apartments where my biggest concern was whether the downstairs neighbor was playing music too loud, the idea of protecting my first real home had become something of an obsession. The security company, Safeguard Systems, had recommended their premium package, which included motion sensors around the entire perimeter of the property, cameras with night vision capabilities, and a sophisticated alarm system that would alert both me and their monitoring service if anything unusual occurred. The pool area, in particular, was covered by 3 separate motion sensors, each one calibrated to detect movement larger than a house cat. The system was so sensitive that it could distinguish between a raccoon wandering through the yard and a human being climbing over the fence. When I mentioned this to the technician during the final installation, he'd laughed and said, "Trust me, if someone so much as thinks about taking an unauthorized swim, you'll know about it." I thought it was overkill at the time. Now, looking back, I realize it was probably the best investment I'd ever made. The first few weeks with the pool were everything I dreamed they would be. I'd wake up early, swim laps before work, and then spend my evenings floating on an inflatable raft, listening to music and watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. On weekends, I'd invite friends over for barbecues and pool parties. And for the first time since moving to Maple Grove Drive, I felt like I'd found my place in the world. Karen, predictably, was not pleased with this development. The complaints started small. She claimed the sound of the pool filter was keeping her awake at night, even though the unit was whispered quiet and located on the opposite side of my house from her bedroom window. She suggested that the chlorine smell was somehow drifting into her yard and aggravating her sensitive respiratory system. She even tried to argue that the reflection of sunlight off the pool water was creating a glare that interfered with her television viewing. Each complaint was more ridiculous than the last, but I tried to be neighborly about it. I adjusted the pool filter's schedule to run during daytime hours only. I switched to a saltwater system to reduce the chlorine odor. I even installed a privacy screen along the fence line to minimize any potential glare issues. Nothing was ever enough for Karen. The situation reached a breaking point in early August during what would later become known in my circle of friends as the Great Pool Party Incident of 2024. I had planned a small gathering to celebrate my birthday, nothing extravagant, just a dozen close friends, some grilled burgers, and an evening of swimming and socializing. I'd even taken the precaution of informing my immediate neighbors about the party, including Karen, and assured them that we'd keep the noise to a reasonable level and wrap up by 10 p.m. Karen's response was swift and characteristically dramatic. "Absolutely not," she declared, standing on my front porch with her arms crossed and her mouth set in a grim line. Section 12.3 of the HOA guidelines clearly states that social gatherings exceeding 6 people require prior approval from the Homeowners Association Board. You should have submitted a formal request at least 2 weeks in advance. I stared at her in disbelief. "Karen, it's my birthday party. We're talking about 12 people in my backyard for a few hours." "Rules are rules," she replied, tapping her clipboard against her hip. "If we make exceptions for one person, pretty soon everyone will think they can ignore the community standards." "What community standards? It's a backyard barbecue, not a rock concert." "The noise ordinance alone," Karen, I interrupted. My patience finally wearing thin, "I'm having this party. I've been a good neighbor, I've followed every single one of your ridiculous suggestions, and I've put up with your constant complaints for months. But I'm not going to let you dictate how I celebrate my birthday in my own backyard." Her face turned an alarming shade of red that clashed spectacularly with her hot pink lipstick. "We'll see about that," she hissed, and stormed off across my lawn, her heels leaving small divots in the grass. I should have taken that as a warning. The party itself was wonderful. My friends arrived around 4 p.m., and we spent the afternoon swimming, playing volleyball in the pool, and catching up on each other's lives. The food was perfect, the weather was ideal, and for the first time in months, I felt completely relaxed and happy in my own home. Even some of my other neighbors stopped by to say hello and compliment the pool setup, apparently. Karen's complaints hadn't poisoned the entire neighborhood against me. As the evening progressed and the sun began to set, we moved the party to the pool deck, where I'd set up a sound system and some comfortable seating. The music was kept at a reasonable volume, and our conversation was no louder than you'd expect. From a group of friends enjoying each other's company, we were well within the bounds of normal social behavior, and certainly not violating any noise ordinances, but Karen had other plans. Around 9 p.m., just as we were getting ready, "Mr. Davidson, are you still there?" Monica's voice crackled through my phone as I stood frozen at my back door, watching Karen through the security app as she finally stepped into my pool. The night vision camera captured her awkward entry. She was clearly not a graceful swimmer, and the way she clutched the pool ladder suggested this wasn't exactly a routine midnight exercise session. "Yes, I'm here," I whispered, though I wasn't sure why I was whispering. The person, in my backyard, ... they're in the pool now. "Sir, that's concerning. Pool areas can be particularly dangerous during break-ins. Please make sure all your doors and windows are locked and stay away from any glass surfaces." I almost laughed despite the surreal situation. Dangerous. The only thing dangerous about Karen was her ability to turn a simple neighborhood dispute into a federal case. But as I watched her wade deeper into the pool, something about her movements seemed off. She was moving slowly, almost tentatively, and she kept looking around, as if she expected someone to appear at any moment. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Karen wasn't alone. The motion sensors had been triggered by more than just Karen's midnight swimming expedition. As I watched the camera feed more carefully, I could see movement near the pool. House shadows that suggested at least 2 other people were moving around the perimeter of my property. The night vision made it difficult to make out details, but I could see figures crouched behind the outdoor furniture, apparently watching Karen's aquatic adventure. "Monica," I said, my voice suddenly urgent, "I think there might be more than one person back there. How many people are we talking about, Mr. Davidson?" "I'm not sure." I switched between camera feeds, trying to get a better view of the additional figures. They seemed to be hiding like they're watching the person in the pool. "Sir, this sounds like it could be a coordinated break-in. Our patrol unit is 2 minutes out. I need you to go to your bedroom, lock the door, and stay on the line until they arrive." But I couldn't tear myself away from the security feed. The situation in my backyard was becoming more bizarre by the minute. Karen was now floating on her back in the center of the pool, apparently oblivious to the fact that she was being watched by multiple people hiding in the shadows. Meanwhile, the hidden figures seemed to be communicating with each other through hand signals, moving with a level of coordination that suggested this was some sort of planned operation. What the hell was happening in my backyard? That's when I heard the first voice. "Karen, what are you doing?" The voice was female, coming from somewhere near the pool house, and it carried clearly through the night air. "You were supposed to wait for the signal." Karen's head snapped up from where she'd been floating, and she quickly swam to the edge of the pool. "I couldn't help it, Linda. The water looked so inviting, and I wanted to see what all the fuss was about, Linda." I squinted at the camera feed, trying to identify the other figures. As my eyes adjusted to the grainy night vision, I began to recognize shapes and movements that seemed familiar. The way one person gestured with their hands, the distinctive posture of another figure emerging from behind the pool furniture. These weren't random intruders. These were my neighbors, Mr. Davidson. Monica's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you still there?" "They're not burglars," I said, still staring at the screen in disbelief. "They're my neighbors. They're having some sort of pool party in my pool, without my permission." "Sir, that's still trespassing. Our patrol unit will sort this out." When they arrive, as if on cue, I heard the distant sound of a vehicle pulling into my driveway. Through the front window, I could see the distinctive red and blue lights of a private security patrol car reflecting off the neighboring houses. This was about to become very public very quickly. But the scene in my backyard was far from over. As the security lights illuminated the driveway, the figures around my pool began to move with sudden urgency. I watched as what appeared to be Linda Morrison from 3 houses down emerged from behind the pool house, followed by Bob and Janet Chen from across the street. Even old Mr. Hendricks from the corner house was there, though he seemed to be having trouble keeping up with the group's sudden scramble for cover. "Karen, get out of the pool," Linda hissed, her voice carrying clearly through the night air. "The security company is here." But Karen seemed to have other ideas. Instead of getting out of the pool, she swam to the center and began what could only be described as synchronized swimming moves. Her arms moved in elaborate patterns above the water, and she appeared to be humming something that sounded suspiciously like the theme from Jaws. "Karen," Bob Chen's voice joined the chorus of urgent whispers. "This isn't the time for your aquatic interpretive dance. I'm communing with the water spirits. Karen called back, her voice echoing across the pool deck. "This is a sacred ritual that cannot be interrupted." Sacred ritual. I stared at my phone screen, wondering if I was having some sort of stress-induced hallucination. My uptight, rule-obsessed neighbor was performing interpretive dance in my pool at midnight while claiming to commune with water spirits, and apparently half the neighborhood was in on whatever this was. The doorbell rang, followed by a firm knock. "Safeguard security," a voice called from the front door. "Mr. Davidson, we're here about the alarm." I looked back at the security feed one more time. Karen was now floating on her back again, apparently having concluded her water spirit communion. While the other neighbors seemed to be engaged in some sort of heated discussion about exit strategies, Mr. Hendricks was pointing toward the back gate, while Linda appeared to be counting people on her fingers, like she was taking attendance. At the world's most bizarre neighborhood meeting, "I'll be right there," I called to the security officer, then spoke into my phone. "Monica, I'm going to talk to your patrol unit now, but I think this situation is more complicated than we originally thought." "Sir, would you like us to contact the police as well?" I paused, considering my options. On one hand, these people were clearly trespassing on my property and using my pool without permission. On the other hand, they were my neighbors, and getting the police involved in what appeared to be some sort of middle-aged suburban shenanigan might escalate things beyond what was necessary. "Let me talk to your officer first," I said. "Maybe we can sort this out without involving the police." "Understood, Mr. Davidson. Officer Martinez is at your front door now." I hung up and headed to the front door, my mind racing with questions. How long had this been going on? Was this the first time my neighbors had decided to use my pool as their personal aquatic playground? Or had there been other midnight swimming sessions that I'd somehow missed? And what was all this talk about? Signals and sacred rituals. Officer Martinez was exactly what you'd expect from a private security patrol, professional, alert, and probably wondering why he was being called out for what appeared to be a neighborhood pool party. He was a compact man in his 40s, with graying hair and the kind of steady demeanor that suggested he'd seen pretty much everything in his line of work. "Mr. Davidson, I'm Officer Martinez with Safeguard Security. We received multiple motion sensor alerts from your property. Have you had a chance to check your security cameras?" "Yes," I said, glancing back toward the house. "And it's ... Well, it's complicated." "How so?" I gestured toward the backyard. "The people in my pool area aren't exactly burglars. They're my neighbors, but they're definitely trespassing, and I have no idea why they're here or what they think they're doing." Officer Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Your neighbors are in your pool without permission?" "Among other things, yes. At midnight. How many neighbors are we talking about?" I thought about what I'd seen on the cameras, maybe 5 or 6, including the woman who's currently performing what she called a sacred ritual. In my pool, Officer Martinez was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing this information. "Mr. Davidson, I've been doing security work for 15 years, and I can honestly say this is a first. Would you mind if I take a look at the situation before we decide how to proceed?" "Please," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "I was hoping you might have some insight into what exactly is happening here." We made our way through the house, to the back door, where Officer Martinez immediately pulled out a high-powered flashlight and began scanning the pool area. The beam cut through the darkness like a laser, immediately illuminating Karen, who was still floating in the center of the pool, and the group of neighbors who were now huddled together near the pool house like they were planning their next move. "Safeguard security," Officer Martinez called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone who was used to being obeyed. "Everyone in the pool area, please identify yourselves and explain what you're doing on this property." The response was immediate and chaotic. "We're conducting a neighborhood water quality inspection," Linda Morrison called out, her voice shaky with what sounded like barely contained panic. "It's a community wellness initiative," Bob Chen added, apparently deciding that the best offense was a good offense. "The water spirits called to us," Karen shouted from the pool, raising her arms above her head in what might have been a gesture of spiritual. The next morning arrived with a kind of brutal summer heat that makes you question why humans ever decided to live anywhere that wasn't naturally air-conditioned. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly with text messages, emails, and missed calls. For a moment, I thought I was having a stress dream about the previous night's events, but as consciousness fully returned, I realized that the midnight pool incident had apparently become the biggest news. Story in Maple Grove drives recent history. The first text was from my friend Jennifer, who had attended my birthday party. Oh my God, saw the Ring doorbell footage from the Chen's house. Did Karen really break into your pool? The second was from my neighbor 2 doors down. Hey, heard about last night. Is everything okay? Also, is it true that Linda Morrison organized some kind of pool cult? The third was from an unknown number. This is Channel 7 News. We'd like to interview you about the suburban pool trespassing incident. Can you call us back? Channel 7 News. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. How had local news gotten hold of this story? I scrolled through the rest of my messages, finding increasingly bizarre updates about the previous night's events. Apparently, someone had posted video footage to social media. The neighborhood Facebook group was in complete meltdown, and there were rumors that the HOA was calling an emergency meeting. But the most concerning message was from Linda Morrison herself. We need to talk. It's not what you think. There's something you don't know about Karen. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street at 9 a.m. Come alone. Come alone? What was this? A spy novel? I stared at the message, trying to decide if Linda Morrison had completely lost her mind, or if there was actually something more to last night's bizarre pool invasion than met the eye. I made coffee and checked the security cameras from the previous night. Fast-forwarding through the footage to see if I'd missed anything important, what I saw made me nearly drop my coffee mug. The timestamp showed that the first motion sensor had been triggered at 10:15 p.m. I scrolled back through the footage and watched as a lone figure climbed over my fence and spent nearly 30 minutes examining my pool area with what appeared to be some sort of electronic device. The night vision made it difficult to identify the person, but their movements were methodical and purposeful, like they were conducting a technical inspection at 10:45 p.m. The figure was joined by others, and I watched the group huddle together. Near the pool house, for what appeared to be a strategy meeting, they were clearly communicating through hand signals and seemed to have assigned roles for whatever they were planning to do. This wasn't the chaotic, spontaneous pool party that it had appeared to be when I'd first discovered them. This was an organized operation. And then, at 11:30 p.m., Karen appeared. But here's what was strange. The other neighbors seemed surprised to see her. I watched as Linda Morrison gestured frantically at Karen, clearly trying to get her to leave. While Bob Chen appeared to be having some sort of urgent conversation with her near the fence, Karen, however, ignored them completely and began undressing for her midnight swim, acting as if the other neighbors weren't even there. It was almost like there were 2 separate operations, happening simultaneously, whatever the other neighbors were doing in Karen's solo water spirit communion adventure. My phone rang, interrupting my amateur detective work. The caller ID showed Safeguard Systems. Mr. Davidson, this is Monica from Safeguard. I wanted to follow up on last night's incident and let you know that we've completed our analysis of the security footage. Analysis? Yes, sir. When we have multiple motion sensor triggers and extended unauthorized presence on a property, we conduct a detailed review to determine if there are any security vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. And what did you find? Well, that's what I wanted to discuss with you. Are you available to meet with one of our security consultants this morning? There are some unusual elements to last night's incident that we think you should be aware of. Unusual elements. I looked back at my computer screen, where the security footage was still playing. What kind of unusual elements? I'd prefer to discuss this in person, if that's possible. Can you meet us at your property at 10 a.m.? I glanced at the clock. It was already 8:15, which gave me just enough time to meet Linda Morrison at the coffee shop before the security consultation. That works. But can you give me any hint about what you found? Let's just say that your neighbor's behavior last night suggests they had access to information about your security system that they shouldn't have been able to obtain through normal means. The coffee shop on Main Street was one of those deliberately quaint establishments that catered to suburban professionals who wanted to feel like they were supporting local business while still getting a decent cappuccino. I arrived at exactly 9 a.m. to find Linda Morrison already seated at a corner table, wearing oversized sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low over her forehead, like she was trying to avoid being recognized. Linda, I said, approaching the table, cautiously, Are you okay? She looked up at me, and I could see that her face was pale and drawn, as if she hadn't slept. Sit down, she said quietly. We don't have much time. Time for what? Linda, what's going on? Last night you organized some kind of neighborhood pool invasion based on a series of elaborate lies, and now you're acting like we're meeting to exchange state secrets. Because we might be, she said, leaning forward across the table. Listen to me carefully. Last night wasn't my idea. I mean, it was my idea to get everyone over there, but the reason is complicated, then uncomplicated. Linda looked around the coffee shop nervously, then pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. It was a screenshot of what appeared to be a social media post, though I couldn't immediately identify which platform it was from. Look at this, she said, sliding the phone across the table. The post was from an account called Suburban Truth Seeker and was dated 3 weeks earlier. The text read, "Investigating suspicious neighbor activities. In Maple Grove area, new resident installed elaborate surveillance system claiming it's for security, but equipment appears to be more sophisticated than necessary for residential use. Monitoring situation for signs of corporate espionage or other suspicious activities. Neighbors report unusual late-night activities and possible drug manufacturing equipment in backyard. Will update with findings." I stared at the screen, reading the post twice to make sure I understood what I was seeing. Linda, this is about me, isn't it? Keep reading. I scrolled down to see the comments, which included detailed discussions about my daily routine, my work schedule, and even speculation about what kind of equipment I had in my home office. There were photos of my house taken from various angles, including some that must have been shot from neighboring properties. One commenter had posted what appeared to be a floor plan of my house with annotations about possible surveillance center and potential chemical storage areas. Who is Suburban Truth Seeker? I asked, though I was beginning to have a terrible suspicion. That's what we've been trying to figure out, Linda said. The account has been posting about you for weeks, making all sorts of accusations about what you're really doing in that house. Drug manufacturing, corporate espionage, running some kind of surveillance operation on the neighborhood. Crazy stuff. But the posts are detailed enough and well-researched enough that some people were starting to believe them. Some people, like who? Like Karen. I felt my stomach drop. Karen thinks I'm manufacturing drugs in my house. Karen thinks you're running a government surveillance operation disguised as a residential property. She's convinced that your security system is actually a cover for monitoring the entire neighborhood, and that the pool is some kind of signal beacon or communication device. I stared at Linda, waiting for her to tell me this was all an elaborate joke. When she didn't, I took a sip of my coffee and tried to process what she was telling me. So last night, Last night was supposed to be a fact-finding mission. We're going to get into your backyard, take some photos of your security equipment, maybe get a closer look at the pool to see if there was anything obviously suspicious about it. I thought if we could prove that you were just a normal guy with a normal pool and a normal security system, we could put an end to all the conspiracy theories. But then Karen showed up and decided to commune with the water spirits. Karen wasn't supposed to be there, Linda said, her voice strained. I specifically didn't tell her about the plan because I knew she'd do something crazy. But somehow, she found out anyway. And she showed up with her own agenda. Which was what, exactly? She was convinced that swimming in your pool would allow her to detect any chemical residue from drug manufacturing or electromagnetic signals from surveillance equipment. She called it direct sensory investigation. I put my head in my hands. My neighbor, the woman who had spent months complaining about my rose bushes and garbage can placement, genuinely believed that I was operating some kind of criminal enterprise from my suburban home, and she thought she could detect evidence of it by going swimming in my pool. Linda, I said slowly, how long has this been going on? The online post started about a month after you moved. Detective Chen's tablet displayed what appeared to be a network diagram that looked like something from a cybersecurity textbook. Lines connected various devices, IP addresses, and timestamps in a complex web that made my head spin just looking at it. Mr. Davidson, she began, what we discovered in your security system's logs goes far beyond simple trespassing. Someone has been attempting to access your network remotely for the past 6 weeks. They've been probing for vulnerabilities to identify connected devices. and mapping your digital footprint with a level of sophistication that suggests either professional training or extensive self-education in cybersurveillance. I stared at the diagram, trying to process what she was telling me. You're saying someone's been trying to hack into my security system? Not just trying, succeeding in some cases. She pointed to a series of red dots on the timeline. These timestamps correspond to successful penetrations of your network perimeter. The intruder gained access to your router logs, your smart home device data, and even some of your personal computer files. What kind of files? Work documents, financial records, email correspondence, browsing history, basically anything they could access remotely without triggering your antivirus software. But here's what's particularly interesting. They weren't trying to steal anything. They were documenting everything. Detective Chen swiped to a new screen that showed dozens of screenshots and data logs. The intruder was systematically cataloging your digital activity to build a comprehensive profile of your daily routine, work schedule, financial status, and personal communications. They even accessed your smart home devices to track when you were home, when you were sleeping, and when you had visitors. My smart home devices, your thermostat, your smart TV, your Amazon Echo, even your coffee maker, anything connected to your Wi-Fi network was potentially compromised. The intruder was using this data to predict your behavior patterns with remarkable accuracy. Officer Martinez, who had been listening to this conversation with growing alarm, stepped forward. Detective Chen, are we talking about identity theft? Here, corporate espionage. That's what we thought initially. But the data wasn't being extracted from Mr. Davidson's network. It was being stored locally and then used to generate content for social media accounts. My stomach dropped. Suburban Truth Seeker. You know about that account? I told Detective Chen about my coffee shop meeting with Linda Morrison and everything she'd revealed about Karen's conspiracy theory campaign. As I spoke, I watched the detective's expression grow increasingly serious. Mr. Davidson, what you're describing is a textbook case of cyberstalking combined with a coordinated harassment campaign. But there's something else we discovered that complicates the situation even further. She swiped to another screen that showed what appeared to be multiple social media accounts, all connected by dotted lines to central nodes labeled with IP addresses. The Suburban Truth Seeker account is just one of at least 12 different personas that have been created to target you specifically. There are accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, Nextdoor, and several neighborhood forums, all posting coordinated content designed to build a narrative about your alleged suspicious activities. 12 accounts, 12 that we've identified so far. They use different writing styles, different profile photos, and different backstories, but they're all being operated from the same network hub. And that hub is located ... double quotes. She paused to check her tablet. 1243 Maple Grove Drive? That's Karen's house. Yes, it is. I felt a chill run down my spine. Karen hadn't just been complaining about my pool or spreading neighborhood gossip. She'd been conducting what amounted to a psychological warfare campaign against me, creating an entire fictional community of concerned neighbors to validate her conspiracy theories and turn the real neighborhood against me. But here's where it gets really interesting, Detective Chen continued. The network analysis shows that this operation began before you even moved into the house. The first accounts were created 3 weeks before your closing date, suggesting that whoever's behind this had advanced knowledge of your purchase and began preparing their campaign before you'd even taken possession of the property. How is that possible? Real estate transactions are public record. But accessing them and using that information to launch a preemptive surveillance campaign suggests a level of planning and motivation that goes beyond typical neighbor disputes. Officer Martinez was shaking his head. Detective, in 15 years of security work, I've never seen anything like this. This woman has basically turned neighborhood watch into domestic terrorism. Which brings us to last night, Detective Chen said, pulling up new footage that I hadn't seen before. Your security system recorded more than just the trespassing incident. It captured evidence of something much more sophisticated. The video she showed me was taken from a camera angle I hadn't reviewed earlier, one that covered the side yard where my electrical meters and cable connections were located. The timestamp showed 10:15 p.m., just as Linda Morrison had mentioned, but instead of Karen or the other neighbors, the footage showed a figure in dark clothing using what appeared to be professional electronic equipment to examine my utility connections. That device they're using is a network scanner, Detective Chen explained. Military grade. It's designed to identify and map all electronic devices within a specific radius, including their communication protocols and security vulnerabilities. Whoever was operating it last night was conducting a professional-level reconnaissance of your home's electronic infrastructure. But that doesn't make sense, I said, watching the figure work methodically through my utility area. If Karen was behind all the online harassment, why would she need to physically scan my network? She'd already hacked into it remotely. That's exactly the right question, Detective Chen replied, and it's what led us to our most disturbing discovery. She pulled up a new screen that showed two distinct network signatures. The remote hacking attacks on your system were coming from one location, Karen's house, as we expected, but the physical network scanning last night was being conducted by someone using completely different equipment and methods. We're not dealing with one stalker, Mr. Davidson. We're dealing with two separate operations that happen to converge on your property at the same time. The implications of this hit me like a physical blow. You're saying Karen's conspiracy campaign was real, but there was also someone else conducting actual surveillance on me. That's exactly what we're saying. Karen Whitmore appears to have been running a harassment campaign based on paranoid delusions about your activities, but her campaign may have inadvertently attracted the attention of someone who was conducting legitimate surveillance for unknown reasons. Officer Martinez was studying the tablet screen with obvious concern. Detective, are we talking about federal agents? Corporate espionage? What kind of legitimate surveillance would involve midnight reconnaissance of a suburban home? That's what we need to find out. But first, we need to secure Mr. Davidson's property and ensure his safety, because whoever conducted that scan last night now has detailed information about his home security system and may be planning a more extensive operation. I felt like I was caught in some sort of surreal nightmare. My simple suburban life had somehow become the intersection point for both a neighbor's elaborate cyberstalking campaign and what appeared to be professional surveillance by unknown parties. The midnight pool incident hadn't been the climax of my neighborhood troubles. It had been the moment when two separate conspiracies collided. Detective Chen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, what exactly are you recommending I do? In the short term, we're going to upgrade your security system with additional monitoring capabilities and establish a direct line to our cybercrimes division. We're also going to need you to document any unusual activities or communications you've had recently that might explain why you've attracted this level of attention. What kind of unusual activities? Any work projects involving sensitive information? Any personal relationships that might have created enemies? Any financial transactions that might have flagged you for investigation? Any online activities that might have put you on someone's radar? Basically anything that might explain why you've become a target for both harassment and surveillance. I thought about my work in digital marketing, my quiet personal life, my utterly mundane suburban existence. Nothing I could think of seemed remotely interesting enough to warrant this level of attention from anyone, let alone multiple parties. I can't think of anything, I said honestly. I work for a technology consulting firm doing marketing for software companies. I don't have access to classified information. I don't work with government contracts. I don't have any enemies that I know of. The most controversial thing I've done since moving here is install a pool that Karen didn't approve of. What about your previous residence? Any issues there? I lived in an apartment complex in downtown for 3 years. No problems with neighbors, no security incidents, no unusual activities. This all started after I moved to Maple Grove Drive. Detective Chen made notes on her tablet, then looked up at me with an expression that suggested SH.